I hope everybody's doing well. There's a little bit of extra, a little bit of time lapse here. You can see Venus right there near the center. We've got clouds flowing from east to west across our area of Texas. And part of that is due to some isotropic lift with this cool dome of high pressure moving southward across Texas. And we've also got this upper level low located right out here near the Big Bend. Let's look at the large-scale pattern. We haven't really done that very much. And by large scale, we're talking about weather across the continent. And we're talking in large time and space scales. So changes on the scale of days and hours, or days and on the scale of hundreds and thousands of miles. So we're talking about long waves. So here we have a very large long wave ridge across the western U.S., kind of a trough off the east coast and off the west coast right there, a little bit of outside of our domain. And then superimposed on this, we have this smaller trough across Texas. Let's take a quick peek ahead what that's going to be doing over the next couple of days. Looks like that's sheared off, and we've got something that's called a Rex block. This is where we have it's kind of like an omega block, but we have low pressure south, or low heights, south of high heights, south of low heights. They're kind of stacked like that. So that's one kind of blocking pattern we might see from time to time. And this smaller scale low pressure system is rotating around the larger scale high. So it's kind of like planets orbiting the sun, a little bit of that going on. So we're seeing this kind of gradually move westward over the next day or two. And it migrates all the way to Tucson. And that kind of gets out of the picture here in Texas for a couple days, and then it opens back up, and we see it's back in the picture here for Friday. So we'll check that out on the charts ahead. Let me check if my European data came in real quick. I might have to request that. Let me do that really quick here. Let's see here. Models, ECMWF. I don't think we're going to get that. I'm going to pull up temperature here and let it crunch that for a few minutes. And we'll look at some other products. Here we have the water vapor imagery. This is giving us average water vapor content in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. So relatively dry up north. And then south of that, we've got this area of tropical moisture spreading northward in the mid levels. And above that, you can see we've got a little bit of a jet stream pattern right here along the Texas coast. So that little S shape to this high cirrus, that would be associated with probably a jet along the backside. And this is also an area of turbulence. If you're flying an airline and you're northward of this cloud pattern, this is a good area to encounter maybe a little bit of light to moderate chop there. And we did see this upper level low on the NAM chart just a few minutes ago. So it's right there over the Big Bend area, about where we expected. All right, let's do our temperature and thermal structure analysis, looking at thickness and isobars. So we can see already we've got a cold front diving south out of Alberta and Saskatchewan. There it is right there. And ahead of that, warm front extending down through the Great Lakes. And then you can see the gradient kind of runs through this area here. Lots of gradients. So we can bring in an occluded front through here. This looks like a cold occlusion extending into the Hudson Bay region. So I don't have purple on this tool set, but I would draw the front kind of like that. And then elsewhere, Look at that. We've got a bit of a thermal gradient off the Carolinas coast. So certainly we would probably look for a front in that area just south of that gradient. And that might connect up with what we have in Texas right here. This little weak thermal gradient here, this is associated with a bit of isotropic lift over Texas, and that explains the clouds that you saw in the imagery just a few seconds ago right there. And we've got above average temperatures once again for today. This is thermal anomalies. So Canada running much above average here. And then temperatures are below average in Texas. That's very tightly associated with that upper level low. It's there because we have a cool structure to the atmosphere. We've got high densities, and that gives us low heights aloft. And part of this is probably due to radiational cooling at night too, especially out here on the Mexican plateau. Probably getting some very cool nights there. Just how cold are we seeing across much of the U.S. and how warm is it in Canada? Well, let's take a look at Alberta. Let me get that centered right there. Kind of a crazy pattern here because you can see the cold front sinking southward. And normally when we have cold fronts coming out of Alberta in November, we expect to see temperatures of about 0 through 30 degrees Fahrenheit. We've got 40s and 50s. Mostly 40s. But it's very warm because there's a downslope component here. It was probably a little bit warm earlier today. And you can see in that downslope area we have temperatures of about 48 right there. So that matches up pretty good with this area of warm temperatures. Then as we go southward into Texas, we pick up more of that cool air mass. And we're below the climatological normal for right now, which is usually pretty warm. So 40s and 50s down here, that's going to mean a rather cool air mass, and we're going to really see that high pressure aloft or that low pressure aloft really stand out on the charts. So there's that northeasterly flow across Texas, pushing a front all the way down, well down to Mexico. See that right there? Where would the leading edge be? I don't know, probably. Good reef, probably, yeah, look at this, all the way down to Chiapas, Mexico, down in this area. There's a mountain pass through here where there's a ducting of the winds. If we get an Arctic blast going through that part of Mexico, this area here can see winds of about 40 to 50 miles an hour. And they're showing northerly winds at 20 at that station right there. So it looks like some of that cold air is actually filtered very far south. So we're going to have to probably go all the way to Central America to find that front. Do we see any trace of that down there? Let's take a quick look on the charts. Well, let's see. It looks kind of like a disorganized mess. I don't really see where a front would be. Yeah, this would be pretty tricky to find. We would have to use the surface data and look at trends at a lot of the different stations. And probably at that point we can probably find exactly where the front is. Sometimes you can find lee side effects where one area of the coastline has very cloudy conditions and the other has dry. And I'm probably seeing a little bit of that here in Honduras. See that very cloudy area with onshore flow? That's probably what's going on there. And as it flows downslope on the lee side, we get drying. So this is probably indicating a large-scale northerly flow across that part of Central America there. So this boundary may go all the way to Venezuela, Costa Rica, Panama, probably. But back here in the U.S., we were seeing mostly this large bubble of high pressure across the central U.S. and the East Coast seeing northerly flow here. Same story in the Northeast U.S. Cool northerly flow across upstate New York, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, and Maine there. And then we go a little bit west of there. There we're starting to pick up the warm air advection pattern in Minnesota, so temperatures above average. Combination of downslope flow and advection of warmer air from the more southerly latitudes. And as you can see, there's also been very substantial solar heating in this area here. Very clear conditions, a lot of warming of the ground right there. Okay, let me see if our European model data came in. AWIPS here can be kind of finicky. Looks like I got a few frames in here, because we're going to have some changes coming up next week and possibly a chance of thunderstorms. Let's look at the ECMWF or the GFS, and I'll run that through for you. Okay, the forecast for the next week or two. Let me get this centered here very quickly. Okay, that looks good. There's the current conditions, front coming out of Canada. You remember that from the surface analysis. We're going to see that front mostly head for the northeast U.S. So there's the bulk of the front from Chicago to Pennsylvania and New England. High pressure coming in back behind it. Little baroclinic high right there in Minnesota. And that leaves the central plains on the periphery of all that. So maybe a chance of a backdoor front. Let me get that back where it was. I think I lost that. Okay, chance of a backdoor front. Possibly like that, but no big Arctic outbreak plowing through here. Okay, so we're up to Saturday and Sunday. Looks very cool across the northeastern U.S. And it looks like we do get a little bit of a backdoor feed of cool air. See that gradient of high pressure across Texas? There's a 1024 millibar isobar, 1028. That's going to be an east to a northeast gradient. That'll keep Texas a little bit cool. So we're going to get, a little bit of a backdoor push of cool air coming in from the Midwest. And we talked about haze a few days ago on Saturday. That's going to probably bring our visibilities down here in Texas. Probably going to see a little bit of haze coming into this area. And some clouds as we get a little bit of upslope flow here. When we have northeasterly winds, that will back up a lot of clouds in this part of Texas, right there. So we can see ceilings come down in this area, very pervasive fog and IFR conditions there. Okay, so we're up to Sunday and Monday. That little baroclinic high moves into the northeast U.S. and we start to see a warm air advection pattern across the Great Lakes. Next, Alberta Clipper coming south, and this looks a little bit weaker. However, there's big changes coming up for the Pacific Northwest right in here. And if you watch that next week, you can see the thickness isopleths starting to really tighten up here. This is going to be the start of a baroclinic development zone right there around Washington. And you can see that really starting to come together on Tuesday. And we were able to squeak out a storm system right here coming into Oregon. So that's going to be Tuesday, and now we're going to see it crossing the Rockies, and here it goes. See that very tight packing coming into California and Nevada? That's the system crossing the Rockies. It's not very obvious right there on the charts, especially if you're looking only at pressure. That's why these thickness charts are very important. And if you don't have thickness, you can look at 850 and 700 millibar temperatures. So here comes the system crossing the Rockies, and by Thursday morning looking like this. Colorado low pressure system right there coming together, maybe cold front looking something like that. And if we have enough moisture here in Texas or Oklahoma or Kansas, this will be a good pattern for thunderstorms. That's the reason I was looking at the ECMWF. I was trying to figure out how much energy we had for thunderstorms. And north of that warm front, this is going to be a good area for IFR, like right in this area. So if I was a pilot planning a solo flight or something like that for Thursday, I would probably want to reschedule that if I was in that area. And we're going to also see the development of the dry line in West Texas, probably something like that. Cold front looking like that, dry line out ahead of that, because that's going to tighten up where we have this cyclogenesis coming together in West Texas. That'll bring the temperature contrast closer together and help firm that dew point contrast up as well. So now by later on Thursday, we see the dry slot heading into Kansas. We would probably look for a chance of thunderstorms if we have enough moisture around the Wichita area down in Oklahoma City. And then moving forward into Friday, it starts pulling out into the Midwest, into Des Moines right there. So let me draw out the fronts for you. Front sweeping through Texas, and you can see we get the downslope conditions on Friday. Going to be kind of a warm, windy day until the bulk of the cold air comes in. And then things start moving out into the Mississippi River Valley. So this is probably vaguely like a system we might have seen on the April 3rd superstorm day, April 3rd, 74. Very similar pattern to this, but we're not going to see that if we don't have good moisture coming out of the Gulf, and I don't really know if we have that. This is also similar to the storm that sank the Edmund Fitzgerald in Lake Superior right there. That storm came also from Kansas and moved up like that. So probably going to be kind of stormy out on the Great Lakes here. We're looking at Friday, November 18th right here. Yeah, this looks like a good Great Lakes storm here coming through. And then the cold front moves into the western or the eastern U.S. right there for the weekend. So it's going to turn cold and blustery again for the weekend before Thanksgiving in the Northeast. Then after that, I don't know. The GFS says this, but and we're almost certainly going to have this very strong thickness gradient across the central U.S. So it does look like maybe it's going to be a little bit stormy around Thanksgiving, or at least we're going to have kind of a progressive pattern in place with a lot of weather changes coming up. So things ought to get interesting for this weathercast in the next several days at least. Okay, I think that's about all I got for you, so I'll wrap this up, and I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow.